Hello and good evening, everybody. Welcome to our GPG Thursday podcast. I'm Pux, and I'm here today with Scott and Luke. And you may have already very quickly noticed that our illustrious leader, Flap, is nowhere to be seen. He's busy enjoying.
Makes him sound like he's gone AWOL or something, Pux. He's nowhere to be found, like we didn't know what was happening.
He's disappeared forever. We don't know where he is. Yeah. No, I think he's taken an extended break for Easter, and he's busy tonight and has plans on all sorts of different days. So he unfortunately can't make it. But we are here to give you some gaming chat, gaming news, and hopefully you will enjoy the next hour to hour and a half of us. And as we go along, before I do start, by all means, chat. I'd love you to all be involved and let us know if you have any particular questions or things that you'd like us to answer during the show. And then between us all on the panel, we'll try to collect those questions and answer them throughout the show. So with that aside, the main things we're going to be talking about tonight are mainly around Kingdom Hearts 4 being revealed, which I'm very excited about and really happy to get into. And then there was the Creative Assembly being involved with Halo Infinite's development in some description, which I think Scott and Luke are going to help take the reins on and get all your questions and answers and have some fun talking about that. And we're also going to delve into, I think we've titled it Xbox, but rumored new hardware, although it could just be chip revisions or that kind of stuff. And I think we've all got different various tidbits of information that we can discuss. So looking forward to getting into that. And if we do have time, we've got a few more things in the back pocket to discuss. But apart from that, that's about it. So let's crack right into it. How are you guys? I should probably add before we start. Scott and Luke, are you doing okay? Have you had a good weeks? We'll start with yourself, Scott.
Yeah, good, mate. Thank you very much. Obviously looking forward to Easter. Nice 4-day weekend from work. It's always nice, isn't it? So
definitely, yeah.
Hopefully everyone else has got like an extended break. So yeah, good week. And looking forward to hopefully an even better weekend with a bit of luck.
Yeah, no, definitely. How about yourself, Luke? Are you going to be enjoying a 4-day weekend as well?
Yeah. Just echo what Scott said. Really, yeah. Just happy for the time off at this point, and just hopefully relax a bit and play some games, do some other stuff. It's gonna be fun.
What's on the agenda, Luke, for this weekend? What games? What are you playing?
So at the moment, I'm weirdly flitting between a few, but the main three are Elden Ring still. I've had a kind of extended break from that for no reason, actually. Just, sometimes you just kind of stop playing and then you're like, oh, I should pick that back up again. So there's that. I did pick up Kirby and the Forgotten Land, which is actually brilliant. Really, really enjoying that.
Are you very far into that yet, or are you just starting out?
I'm probably about more than that. Probably about 3.5 hours into that.
Oh, okay.
So it's a fair chunk, and I've heard it's maybe 10 hours ish. Kind of normal run through. So going out to halfway. But I really enjoyed it. I think it's really, really good. Actually, it reminds me a lot of Super Mario 3D Land. Actually, that's the kind of vibes I get from it.
Definitely, yeah.
It very similar kind of perspective and just endlessly kind of creative, and the mouthful mode stuff is really funny and weird, and it's all the typical Nintendo stuff. It's really good. It's the first Kirby game I think I've played in a long time where it's actually quite special, so that's cool. And I'm also I no idea why, but the other evening I had a real craving to go back and replay The Last of Us Part 2. So
wow, that's a random one.
Yeah, really random. I just really felt like replaying it. I have no idea why. But I was already through a second playthrough essentially, so I'm kind of already over halfway through the game again.
Oh, so you picked up a previous save, like you didn't start fresh.
I didn't start again because it would just be too long. But yeah, really enjoying that as well. So just lots to a lot of catch-up games at the moment. I think it's quite loose and light in terms of new stuff coming out, so it's a good time to dive into old stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
What's the next big thing that you guys are looking forward to out of interest? Is there anything that's like almost imminent?
You know what? I've got a random one for you, and I'm actually quite looking forward to playing Bug Snacks when that comes to Game Pass at the end of this month. I was intrigued with it when I first saw it, and of course it was PlayStation exclusive. I've got a PS4, but I never picked it up. And then when I saw the announcement that it's coming to Game Pass, I thought, oh man, you know what? I'm actually really intrigued by this game. Like I can't even remember the descriptions of it. Like, it's first person, you capture things, but there's also like a darker story behind it or whatever. And yeah, it's just something that just really took me. So I might be trying that at the end of this month.
Nice. Yeah. I'm morbidly curious about that game just because of like the dark like tones it's meant to have, which obviously doesn't like, I guess at first sight, it doesn't maybe appear obvious. So to be honest, I get kind of almost like Viva Pinata vibes in a weird way maybe as well. But yeah, I don't think I'm going to play that one, Matt.
It's funny that I've seen some people saying, "Oh yeah, you know, Game Pass needs more of these family-friendly games," and Bugsnax is kind of family-friendly, but it's also like weirdly adulty as well. It's a bit like I guess it's a bit like The Simpsons, right? Like early Simpsons, where you can watch it as a kid and it's entertaining, but a lot goes over your head, and there's actually some stuff that's quite adult, you know, in terms of meaning. So Bugsnax is a little like that, and it has some. I won't spoil stuff, but it has some weird things in it. I think people.
It's coming to Game Pass as part of DLC, isn't it? And we get that for free.
Yeah.
Or it's coming out and as an extra free add-on, isn't it?
Big
Snacks or something.
The Big Snacks, the Isle of Big Snacks, yeah. So I'm sure people will have an opinion on it. It's got a great song, great theme song. By Kero Kero Bonito, who are absolutely delightful. So if anything, you will enjoy that bit. You may not enjoy the rest of the game, but you'll enjoy the theme song. I mean, I'm really struggling to think of anything that's coming out soon that I'm looking forward to.
It's quite a dry period, isn't it?
Yes. So, I mean, the stuff that I'm kind of looking forward to is just stuff this year that doesn't really have a date.
She's just asked you to sing the Bugsnax theme to you, Luke.
No, I'm not going
to. If you've got the balls, mate.
I don't have the pipes for that, I'm afraid. Not tonight, BMG. I've got a drink nearby, but I need to finish that, and then I might attempt it. I can't really think of anything that's coming out soon. I mean, I think everybody's just kind of waiting for June at this point, aren't they? Or some showcase to come up, and some more release dates to be revealed. Summer Game Fest, all that sort of stuff. So
yeah.
It's not interested in picking up the Nintendo Switch Sports, or whatever it is, coming out soon.
Oh, you never know. I mean, if the reception, I saw the previews; they were quite positive. So he might. You never know with that one. I think.
Yeah, that's true. How about yourself, Scott? Are you anything in particular you're looking forward to, seeing as you posed the question to us?
Not in particular. If anything, I'm kind of just looking forward to Elden Ring because I've not started that yet. So I'm playing Guardians of the Galaxy at the moment because I went through Dark Souls 3 to Tunic, which we've got on screen at the moment, and I've just realized I said this in the chat. This is pretty horrendous gameplay because this is early on. I think it's not showing us in good light, but I played those kind of back to back, and I was like, I can't jump into Elden Ring straight after Dark Souls and then Tunic. So I decided, Guardians of the Galaxy. I've just finished chapter 3, so I'm still fairly early in Guardians of the Galaxy, but then I'll be jumping into Elden Ring, I think, after that, and that'll probably last me a little while. We've got Halo Season 2 next month, or Halo Infinite's multiplayer Season 2, which I'll probably be jumping into as well. But other than that, not an awful lot on the radar in the near future, at least. I think so. It'll just be backlog stuff, I think.
No, fair enough. I suppose, given that nice introduction, we should probably jump into one of our first topics, I guess. And speaking of new games that got announced earlier this week, Square Enix held their 20th anniversary Kingdom Hearts event, which I know a lot of people were eagerly anticipating and wondering if there was going to be any new reveals and such. And for the most part, if anyone did watch the whole 7.5-8 minute trailer for the anniversary, I guess the first part of it was all about the mobile game of all things, and I think this is one thing that a lot of people have this love-hate relationship with Kingdom Hearts, where all of the important story lore all exists across all of the different games, across all the different platforms, across all of the years of which the series has been running. I know more recently you've got the Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2's kind of final mix collections, which hold most of them, but don't always tell the full story. And that kind of, in a way, brings us nicely to the reveal of Kingdom Hearts 4, which was shown off at the last minute. And I know a lot of people were commenting on the way that the characters look and saying that it's had a real big bump and upgrade. And, oh my God, it looks like Final Fantasy now and all this kind of stuff, which, again, I think there's some potential lore which may need to be explained as to why he may not necessarily look that way all the time, in my opinion. But did you guys on the panel, let us know in the chat, by the way, are you Kingdom Hearts fans? Are you looking forward to it? Could you not care less? Because I know there's people out there who do not give a single care for this kind of thing. But no, Scott and Luke, I know you both. I know, Scott, you had a question you wanted me to potentially answer. But did you watch the trailer when it was first announced? And is this something you're excited for, or again, are you one of the people who couldn't really care less? Because you're big into Final Fantasy, right? So I would have thought that something like this may be up your alley to some degree.
Yeah, Luke, what's your thoughts on Kingdom Hearts, mate? Because I'm kind of thinking I might need to take the approach of, if you've got nothing nice to say, then don't say anything at all. I think. Not the biggest fan of that series, but I'll go into why. But yeah, Luke, what's your thoughts, mate?
Yeah, so I've only ever played Kingdom Hearts 3. So I bought Kingdom Hearts 3 round about when it came out ish.
You never played any of the others ever?
No. So that was mistake one.
That must have been
yeah. So
playing the first one would have been a bigger mistake, Luke. Let me tell you, mate, because I did try Kingdom Hearts 1, and it doesn't. I don't think it's aged well. And that's why I'm not really got into them. I think it controls horrifically. I think
number two, awful. Number 2, I would say, is aged much better than number 1.
Yeah, but you can't. It's not a game that you can just jump into 2, is it?
No, if you've seen parts of 1 and then you start playing 2, like the first 3 hours of 2 you're not actually the main character. You're actually playing as something else, and it all kind of makes sense after about 30 hours in.
Yeah, I'm out. Yeah. I'm out, Pox. Like you're not selling it there.
Oh man.
Yeah. So I got it. I guess not really for me, because my wife is she played 1 and 2 and some of the other various extra games. So she was a really big fan of Kingdom Hearts and still is a big fan. So I was like, okay, well, I'll play it, because at least superficially, it's a good looking game. It was at the time. And I do like the kind of Final Fantasy-esque elements and some of the Disney stuff, not all of the Disney stuff, but some of it. So I played it, and I probably got about, 10 hours in. And whilst I was really enjoying the gameplay, actually the gameplay is very fun. The story is just, especially if you're coming to it with no knowledge at all, it's just such utter nonsense, like so completely bonkers that it's kind of almost off-putting, and I think the thing with Kingdom Hearts is it's a bit like trying to play Destiny 2 now, right? As a new player, like if you've not been in Destiny 2 from the beginning, it's really hard to play Destiny 2 now. It's really only catering for semi-lapsed players and, hardcore fans, really. And I feel like Kingdom Hearts this as a series is pretty much the same. You're not gonna it's so difficult to follow the story of those games because they're kind of just nonsense, but they're not. They're explained nonsense, but they're still nonsense. So, I dropped off it after about 10 to 15 hours. And it's, like I said, it's not a bad game. Like I think in every other aspect, it's actually quite enjoyable. It's just that it's so difficult to remain interested in the story if you're not invested in it already.
This is kind of the problem with the series in general, though, is that because there's a lot of things which just aren't explained. There's no real backstory to many things. And number 3, you're talking. I mean, even though it's the third main inline game, but it's actually it was actually like the 12th one or something. So it's not that you can just play 1 and 2 and understand 3, because a lot of the story and lore all carried on in like the like in the Game Boy one, in the DS one, in the 3DS or the PSP, and the PSP one in particular is like very fundamental to the ending of Kingdom Hearts 3. Because certain characters get introduced and stuff. So I could definitely see why the story would throw you off if you've not even experienced any of it before.
Yeah, and funnily enough, while I was playing it, my wife, was like, I'd ask her questions, who's this or what's this mean? And for some of it, she'd be able to answer it, having played 1 and 2, and then like some of the other stuff. And for some of it, she's just like, I have no idea. I don't know, because she hasn't played all the Kingdom Hearts games. She hasn't played all the spin-offs. She was like, I don't know. And I was like, that's probably not a good sign. And funnily enough, she never played it. Like, she played a bit of it and then she stopped. And I don't know why that was, but I think she was just like, I can't commit myself to this fucking story anymore. Like, I can't really enjoy this in the same way. So
what I find bizarre though is because you both love Final Fantasy, don't you? So I'm like, which is equally as convoluted, surely.
Oh, no, but it's not all. It's not all, because Final Fantasy is just a self-contained story. Every Final Fantasy game is the same. In terms of it's a brand new story. So all you have to do is follow the story of the game. It's not wrapped up in Final Fantasy 16.25 to the power of 4. You know what I mean? Like, there's none of that.
So is it just the fact that is it just the story elements that put you off, or is it? Because again, like games like Final Fantasy, I could argue that also have weird batshit stories that don't really make much sense outside of the context of you haven't played them. But is it just because of the fact you had to go back to an old one to really get it that you kind of thought, nah?
I think it's a mix of things. So I think that is a big part of it. The fact that you can't approach that game as a newcomer to the series and just know what's happening. I don't really feel like if I recall, Kingdom Hearts 3 didn't even really give a recap or anything like that of what happened. So it was very much just throw you into it. And yes, and Final Fantasy stories are pretty crazy, but they're not super complicated. Like, if you go and play any Final Fantasy really. They're not. I mean, first of all, there are very consistent motifs that appear in Final Fantasy games that are consistent across all Final Fantasy games. So you're instantly familiar with concepts in those games. And secondly, the stories aren't super complex or, refer to things that then aren't explained. It pretty much explains it to you at some point. Kingdom Hearts, I feel like sometimes it just doesn't tell you what something means, and you just don't know. It's just all in Nomura's head, right? And it's just
that's why that's why they didn't include the recap in 3, because how the fuck they probably didn't recap what's gone beforehand?
You can't do it. I think it's that. And also, I find more than Final Fantasy, I find Kingdom Hearts at times extremely cringy in terms of voice acting and dialogue and that sort of thing.
100%.
So, and cringe is a really hard thing for me to forgive. I can forgive even just poor general writing, but when cringe just makes me want to just, die, be swallowed up. So, and there's a lot of that in Kingdom Hearts. So kind of those two factors combined mean that it's just, compared to Final Fantasy, it's not for me. And there is cringe in Final Fantasy, but it's more tolerable.
Mm.
Yeah, I think for me, mate. So when Kingdom Hearts 3 came to Game Pass, it wasn't just 3, was it? It was actually the collection, like 1, 2.5 remix.
Let me just be clear though.
It was the mainline games.
Well, the collections are called 1.5 and 2.5.
Yes,
final mix, but they're really just the collections of, I think for 1.5. It's Kingdom Hearts 1, then it's the PS2 remake of the Game Boy game, and then there's some other one. But it's not all games either. I think for the DS ones, they just kind of gave you a theater mode of all the cutscenes. And you just had to sit down and watch it. And then the same thing for 2.5, where you had Kingdom Hearts 2, then there was Dream Drop Distance from the PSP, and then one other one. And then there was, strangely, but to add to the mix, I guess, then they added 2.8, which was...
just listen to yourself, Puck. But just listen to yourself. It's just, this is fundamentally what is wrong with that series. Like it's just madness.
The thing is,
it's just madness.
Outside looking in, I can see it, but because I've been involved in it from basically the beginning, like it makes sense to me, even though I know it's weird at the same time.
Yeah,
but equally, yes, I can. Even me just saying it out loud, even the two, like the 1.5 and 2.5 names, I arguably are terrible names for a collection or two sets of collections. But then I suppose what throws people off is then there's a 2.8, which also has its own separate PSP game, plus another theatre mode for another game. And it's all just to make sure it doesn't go above 3, obviously, because then Kingdom Hearts 3 was meant to tie it all together.
And you know that's kind of this is weird, and this maybe goes into more like JRPGs on Xbox in general, but it's like, how on earth would they expect somebody to go in and just pick up Kingdom Hearts 3 and enjoy it? You know, when there's all this nonsense wrapped around it that you need to. Yes, they put the other games on Xbox and on Game Pass at the same time, but you know, you're probably looking at well over 100 hours worth of content, probably before you even get to the new one in Kingdom Hearts 3. But I really wanted to give it a try. I had never played one before, so I tried the first game, and I just couldn't gel with the controls pucks. I just felt it just didn't age, just like the movement, the jumping. It felt really bad, and I honestly probably give it about an hour, and I was like, nah, this isn't for me.
In a way, I would kind of advise to maybe just watch a quick YouTube video of the first game and then try the second one.
But I don't have 4 hours to spare to watch a YouTube video.
But the controls and stuff are a lot better. But then, like all of us as kids, though, like when you went from 1 to 2, between 1 and 2, there was a Game Boy Advance game which tied both of those together. So when you start playing number 2, it doesn't make any sense because you had to have played the Game Boy Advance game, which itself was a weird card game. It was so weird. And then even the PS2 remake, like you don't actually attack like the normal game, like you just spam the X button or cross whatever. You had to, like with the L and R buttons, you had to, like, you're playing cards, but you're moving your character at the same time, and it's that. I mean, if you want to experience a bad control scheme, give that a go, because I gave up in about an hour, and that was a very patient hour.
I think I'll pass on that, mate. But okay, so I'm going to ask the question now, and I did warn Pucks that I was going to ask this beforehand. We're talking about how nonsensical the story of Kingdom Hearts happens to be. So it's 25 past, Pucks. How much of Kingdom Hearts story do you think you can explain in the next 5 minutes until half past?
I could tell you what the general plot is, but then
I'd love to know, because I've still got no idea.
Like in a small paragraph, the general plot is to try and stop a character called Master Xehanort from opening Kingdom Hearts to gain all power to control the universe and all worlds. That is the general plot overall, is to stop him from opening Kingdom Hearts. And you, as your main character Sora, are entrusted somehow, for some reason, for doing so. But then equally, you're thrown into this whole, saving hearts malarkey and all the rest of it. And it all comes down to, Kingdom Hearts itself is the name of that. The whole point of it is that it absorbs hearts, and then once Kingdom Hearts, it has absorbed enough hearts of its own and gains full power, it then contains all this power to then, if someone bad were to come along and take it, then they could control everything in all of the worlds and the universe. That's kind of basically the plot. And then it gets a lot more weirder from there if you want me to expand on that.
So Kingdom Hearts a place? Is it a person? Is it what is a Kingdom Heart?
That's a difficult question. It's not really a place, but that's probably the closest description of it. So the whole point of the keys and the keyblade and sealing the keyholes is to stop all of these hearts, or the powers of hearts, kind of going into Kingdom Hearts to grant it power to then be taken by someone else to use as power. But it's more of like a Kingdom Hearts itself is kind of like a massive moon scale container of power. Is probably my best way to describe it. And the whole thing about light and darkness all comes from the fact that when someone of not pure heart or not strong enough heart dies, they become It sounds ridiculous now that I'm saying it as well. So they become a Heartless, which are creatures which lose all of their general sense and will attack anybody. However, if you do have a strong enough heart, but you are slain under some description, you are split technically into two. You have your Heartless half and you have your Nobody half. And an in-game organization called Organization 13 are kind of involved in trying to control and help unlock Kingdom Hearts by helping. Well, spoiler alert. I guess it doesn't really matter at this point. But so this character,
no one's going to remember it after this anyway. Pox.
This character called Master Xehanort ends up kind of being the ultimate ruler of Organization 13, but it gets even more convoluted because he's also strong enough and clever enough to have split himself into both a Heartless and a Nobody, but both of which contain their own consciousness and understand their own plot lines. And it gets really weird because at the end of the first game, you're basically fighting a character called Ansem, who's actually Xehanort's Heartless. And then at the end of number 2, you do all that kind of the same stuff again, and it turns out you then fight Xehanort's Nobody. And then it all goes a bit more from there. And then you more characters get brought into the whole mix. And yeah.
I mean, just like that. Luke,
are you following it? Is it making sense?
No, I mean, I tuned out at least 2 minutes ago, to be honest.
That's fair enough.
One last question for you then, Pox.
Yeah, go on.
Oh, actually, that's where I was going to go. Because BMG's put a question in the chat, and he says, "What's Mickey Mouse got to do with it?" So where did the Disney characters come into it? Is it just some sort of like multiverse thing?
There is actually a Nomura reason for this. So the reason why Disney characters are involved in the game is solely because Square Enix shared their Japanese office in the same building as Disney. And Nomura had an idea and had a 5-minute pitch in an elevator ride with one of the execs at Disney Japan, with the idea that this new IP of Kingdom Hearts they wanted to create, before it was even called Kingdom Hearts, Nomura at the time said their characters need to be as big as Disney characters to gain, as big as Mario or Disney characters to kind of get the big boost that they were wanting. And they just so happened to share this office space with Disney, spoke about the idea, did a bit of a prototyping and collaboration, and then between them melded original characters with Final Fantasy characters and Disney characters. So ultimately, they don't have anything to do with it, but the whole point of putting Disney characters into it was to bring people into the game from the offset, because everybody loves Disney characters. Well, most people, I should say. Apart from that, the Disney characters could be anything, but they're just in there because Nomura believed before the first one was made that they needed characters as big as Mario or Disney to even be looked at with this new IP. That's the only reason that they are in it.
Well,
is that okay as an explanation? Does that make sense?
I'm not going to go as far as saying it makes sense, mate. But I appreciate the effort.
Yeah, it's more concise than the game, so I think that's good.
I now know more about Kingdom Hearts from your 5 minutes of information than I have from anything else that I've ever seen on Kingdom Hearts. So
you say that, but can I preface this by saying that all of the games from Kingdom Hearts 1, all of the multiple I think when Kingdom Hearts, including Kingdom Hearts 3, I believe it's like, it could be as short as 12 or as many as maybe 16 games, including mobile games. All of that covered a singular story arc. Kingdom Hearts 4 is the beginning of a new arc called The Lost Master, the Lost Master arc, I believe it's called. Because there is a few gaps and things that happen at the end of Kingdom Hearts 3. So Kingdom Hearts 3 isn't a happy ending. There's things that happen, which number 4 is then beginning the new arc 4. So you technically could jump into 4 blind, but you should probably still know some backstory to understand some bits.
So I guess to round it up, Puck, so are you looking forward to it, mate? Like, were you excited by the announcement?
I was pleasantly surprised, actually. I remember I was out at the time, so I just kind of saw it on my phone, thinking, once I get back, I'll watch this trailer. And yeah, I was really excited for it. And I think knowing it's a new arc as well and the direction it's going in, I think it's going to be really good. But then, interestingly, what Luke was saying about Kingdom Hearts 3 like being all right, the story was a bit meh. A lot of people in the Kingdom Hearts fandom kind of felt similarly with Kingdom Hearts 1, how people feel with 3 in comparison to 2. Because Kingdom Hearts 1 was obviously the original one, first idea, plenty of that could be improved. Then there was improvements with their internal engine, and they eventually released Kingdom Hearts 2, and everybody loved it, and it was miles beyond number 1. But then during development of Kingdom Hearts 3, they jumped midway through development from their own in-house tools to Unreal Engine. So now a lot of people believe that Square should hopefully have a lot better understanding and grasp of how to better utilize the engine, with the expectation that they're then going to jump like. So 2 was built on the foundations of 1, and similarly, they believe that 4 is going to be built on the foundations of 3. So if you like Kingdom Hearts 2, a lot of people are expecting Kingdom Hearts 4 to be the Kingdom Hearts 2 of yesteryear. Oh man, when I'm rambling on and hear myself, I think, how do I even like all this?
Yeah, I think the thing is, I think it is a game that, when you see just the action scenes and the combat scenes, and especially some of the effects, I think it does look good. But I've just got zero interest in even attempting to understand the story. And like I said, some of the early games obviously haven't aged awfully well, which makes it really hard to jump into. But if 4 is potentially a good starting point, if it's starting a new arc, then maybe. I'm not going to promise anything, but maybe.
No, fair enough. But in terms of release date, if anyone is wondering, that none of that was revealed. It was solely a trailer, and that was it, that it's coming. But then in the past with Kingdom Hearts games, they've been quite far into development by the time they reveal it. So a lot of people are anticipating hopefully an early next year release. But we'll see. I'm sure we'll find more information around E3 and afterwards.
Yeah, no platforms announced either. There was the PUCs.
No platforms, which has got people like myself a bit anxious and scared that are they going to ditch Xbox and try to make it a PlayStation exclusive? Otherwise, it means they'll have to fork out for a PS5. But but yeah, hopefully they'll cater for Xbox as well. But no, unfortunately, no platforms announced at this time.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what that is, because obviously 3 being on Xbox and Game Pass was a pretty big deal. I guess it just depends ultimately how successful that was for them. And I don't think we've got any idea really if it did particularly well or not. Hopefully it did, but also at the same time, again, it's one of those things where I find it difficult to blame people if they haven't played the game, because they would have come into the franchise so late, and probably not wanting to maybe go through the effort of researching or playing the first couple of games to get into the third one. So yeah. I guess we'll see on that one,
fingers crossed we'll find out more soon. But with that, I'm aware of the time, so if you don't mind, guys, I want to jump on to the next one, because I want to hear more from you both. So Creative Assembly it's been announced, I should say, that Creative Assembly are now taking a much more major role, is it right to say, within the Halo Infinite what's the term for it? Progression, building, whatever. Do you guys want to, Scott? I'll let you take this from here if you want, and Luke, and because this is mainly your bag, being the big Halo fans of the panel. And chat, let us know what you think of this upcoming news as well. But do you guys want to take it away about this Creative Assembly stuff, and let us know what you think of it?
Yeah, Luke, do you want to take this one, mate? Because you posted this one in the Discord earlier in the week, I think, and obviously it kind of gives the impression that they're going to be involved in a pretty big way, maybe more so than we originally thought, or maybe that the rumors were. So do you want to take this one away, mate?
Yeah, sure. So yes, it's certain Affinity. I think they have been, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they were involved in one of the older Halos, maybe the anniversary, was it 2 or one of those?
They've been
like that?
Involved in Halo in some capacity since the original Halo 2. So one of the first projects, I think, was one of the Halo 2 map packs, the last Halo 2 map pack. So they've been involved in. I didn't actually realize this until I researched them after this news broke, to be honest.
Yeah, so they, as you say, they've been involved for a long time, and there's been rumors for a while. I think Windows Central were reporting that they were making a new game mode for Infinite. So, in the one hand, it's not given their history, given and the rumor, this announcement it wasn't a shock. I don't think it was expected. I think probably the element that was surprising to some extent is that the way that it was phrased. They were saying that they're deepening their relationship with 343, and they've been entrusted with further evolving Halo Infinite in new ways, basically. And it seems from the language, that was all they said. It was just a paragraph. There wasn't really a big press release or anything like that. It was very much a quick tweet and off you go. So, it seems like they are taking on more than just a game mode. And whether that means, I think looking at it, they're probably helping to co-develop a lot of the multiplayer stuff. It would make sense given their history and what they've done. It would make sense, I suppose, from a Halo Infinite perspective, in that 343, despite being very large, have really struggled to pump content out. So the more hands on deck, I guess, they can get, the better in that regard. I think they're probably acutely aware of that. So I think it's it's exciting news to some extent if you're a fan of Halo Infinite, because I think it means first of all that there's a the reaffirmation that they're not just going to abandon the game. I mean, I don't think that was ever in question, but they're kind of heavily committed to bringing more content out, and I think this is from a certain Affinity or a studio that of good pedigree in getting stuff out that's good quality, particularly on the multiplayer side. And that may, we don't know, but maybe 343 are just going to concentrate solely on single player expansion stuff, and certain Affinity will lead the multiplayer, and who knows. So yeah, I think it's really exciting news. It's more evidence, I guess, of certain Affinity working quite closely with Xbox in general. There are rumors that they're making a Monster Hunter style game for the platform exclusively. So, I was quite happy about it. So I guess, Scott, what do you think? I mean, knowing their history and their pedigree, and what are you expecting from them above and beyond this rumored battle royale / elimination / gun game type mode that apparently they're working on?
Yeah, it's interesting, mate, because the news, when I first read it, I had a slightly different opinion to you. I didn't kind of look into it in the way that you read it until you commented that that's what you thought. And I was like, oh, actually, looks onto something here, because the way I read it was just kind of validating the rumors from January that Jez Corden posted on Windows Central that they were making. I guess a new mode, and I think the way it was described was a more casual or more like newcomer friendly mode, which I found interesting, because I don't really know what that looks like in Halo. Like, Arena is particularly sweaty, especially in ranked, and I can understand why that would be particularly off-putting for newcomers. Big Team Battle, I think, is a little bit more forgiving. But I think if it was a battle royale mode that they were working on, I don't know, that to me isn't particularly newcomer friendly, in my opinion. I think battle royales can be, and are in a lot of cases, just as sweaty as arena modes. I mean, Pox, I know you were streaming Fortnite recently. I've been playing a little bit of Fortnite recently, and I find BRs to be sweaty as anything at times. When you got people bouncing all around the place, you got people camping in corners. I don't know. So I find the concept of something newcomer friendly quite interesting. It actually makes me think of more of a PvE mode, similar to like Invasion from Halo Reach, or I guess just like a Horde type mode. Master Chief Collection's just got Flood Fight as a variant for Halo ODST's Horde mode. So I guess a more co-op, that's, I guess, a co-op PvE style game, in my opinion, would be kind of more newcomer friendly, because then you're not playing against other potentially competitive players. You're just playing with friends, shooting Flood or Covenant or whatever. But also, I do think that Halo is going to get a battle royale mode at some point. I think the franchise is made for it more so than any other franchise that's had a BR mode added. So it'll be interesting to see sort of how involved they are, because as I said, I think the tweet was entrusted with further evolving Halo Infinite in some new and exciting ways. And yeah, I guess when you read that, it does sound like they're having a much bigger impact than maybe just a single mode that was rumored. Maybe it is that they're taking the lead on the multiplayer entirely. But I struggle to see that being the case, because 343 have a dedicated multiplayer team. They've got an in-house pro team that they use for competitive things. So it'll be it's going to be interesting to see what it ends up being. And I know me and Luke spoke about this actually earlier in the week, and I guess the thing that we're kind of just looking forward to is just hopefully getting something new, and preferably sooner rather than later. You know, obviously this is exciting news to have more development resource put in. That's hopefully going to help it thrive as a live service game. But we want that in the coming months. We don't want this next year or the year after. We probably wanted it a little bit sooner. And I don't think that's us being entitled or asking for too much. I think that's just the nature of live service games. They were the ones that made the decision to go live service. So they've kind of got to, I guess, live and die by that sword, and, you know, face the consequences of not, I guess, properly working with that model in the same way that other companies have.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we're going to get essentially our first pieces of brand new content next month, which is 6 months after launch. You know, aside from cosmetics, which I wouldn't really count as content in the same way. So I think, you know, the time really has come for them to start delivering on the live service element, the constant flow of content beyond cosmetic packs, all of that stuff. You know, every other game does this. Well, not every other game, but certainly the big live service games are doing this really well. You know, and there's just an abundance of stuff that comes out for them month after month. And hopefully season 2 will mark the start of that for Halo. You know, obviously with the new maps, the new modes, Forge is coming obviously soon-ish. You know, they need to get into a cadence where every couple of months they're giving you new maps at minimum. At minimum, it would have to be new maps every couple of months. So yeah, I just, as I said, and as you said, Scott, like, I think at the time my thought was that this is really good, but I don't want to just be here a year from now saying, oh, I wonder what certain Affinity is still working on, you know, in terms of Halo.
The thing is, the potential with these sorts of things, I think, is massive, because whether it comes in 6 months, 12 months, or 2 years, or never at all, like the way I kind of envisage Halo looking in the future at some point is a game that has the campaign as it is now, additional story content, because we know that that's going to be coming at some point, and I would like to see that, maybe a tease of that at least this year. We know that there's this route. Well, I guess we don't know these things, but we've got the arena, we've got BTB, we've got co-op coming, we've got Forge coming. I think a BR mode, like I say, would work really well for Halo. So they would possibly have kind of the Warzone element to it. And then look at I don't know what your thoughts would be on sort of a PvE style mode as well, like a Left 4 Dead style mode, or obviously an invasion style mode from Halo Reach as well. And I think if you've got all those components in place, if they get there, like campaign, arena, BTB, Forge, Battle Royale, and PvE modes, I think the potential there is absolutely monstrous. The problem is bloody getting there. And I think that's obviously where this announcement hopefully really helps, because even a studio the size of 343, if they've got ambitions to have those, which I do think they will do, they've had PvE in Halo 5 in some capacity, obviously the Warzone mode. They've just added Floodfight to Halo Master Chief Collection. So and I often see Master Chief Collection almost being a way for them to experiment on things as well. The battle pass for Infinite is slightly inspired by what they've done with the Master Chief Collection. Even the studio size of 343, I think that's an awful lot for them to handle, and that's why it makes sense for them to bring somebody like certain Affinity in to assist them with the development.
Totally agreed. I think they're in a position where they have a game, the multiplayer in particular, and the campaign that has an enormous amount of potential, and fundamentally the game is excellent, right? Everything about it is excellent, and it's only through the strength of the gameplay and a testament to the strength of the gameplay that it still has a fairly loyal fan base. Now, obviously, that's significantly dropped because, of course, it will do. I mean, every game has that to some extent. With Infinite, it's dropped heavily because of its content issues, amongst other things. But it's not dropped because the game is poor. It's not a Battlefield situation, for example. It's an excellent game, and as you say, it has a really great bedrock of stuff where you think of it, okay, maybe 2 years time, provided everybody gets their act together, where it has all the modes that you're referring to. It has tons of maps, extra maps from launch. It's got tons of cosmetics. All the battle passes are still there. It's had single player content in addition to the existing campaign. Like, it could be an amazing package, but I think we keep every day we don't get any more content is the further away we get really from that vision. And I think that's the problem, and it's all well. And I think I think the thing that really puts a kicker in it for people, and it does for me, is that 343 worked on this for so long, for such a long time, and it was delayed a full year. And even though they delivered, a day one great product, as you said earlier, Scott, like, they made the decision to make this live service, so they needed to be prepared for that in a proper way, and they just weren't. I mean, it's very clear. Like, it just, I think probably, we always say this, like, another year would probably have got them where they need to be, but it was just never going to happen, and am I happy it came out and I got to experience it last year? Yeah, I am happy, but would I have waited for it another year? You know what, probably, yeah, in hindsight, I guess, and it's always the benefit of hindsight, isn't it? But so, yeah, I think that's all pretty spot on what you're saying, and hopefully certain Affinity will actually, will help them get that cadence of content coming a lot quicker. But the proof will be in the pudding. I mean, I think we'll have to take stock of the game at the end of the year and see what's been delivered. I think that's quite an important milestone.
Yeah, I think it's a big 6 months for the game. One of the other things we were maybe going to touch on if we had time, but it's probably apt to maybe mention it now, is the news that Master Chief Collection actually this week, because of the recent update of the Master Chief Collection, actually ended up getting a higher player count on Steam than Infinite, despite obviously it being much older, which I found fascinating. But what that shows, even though the numbers, it's not like Master Chief Collection was doing hundreds of thousands, but what it shows is that people came back to the game because they added something new in Flood Fight, and Halo Infinite didn't. So yeah, I mean, we've got season 2 coming next month. So within 6 months, we should be in season 4. We should have Co-op. We should have Forge. We will have passed E3 season or summer, where I would like to maybe at least, like I say, have teas of something to do with story content. So, I'm trying to obviously look at it very optimistically here. But if we're in a position in 6 months' time when we've got all these things in place, we've got maps because we're on season 4, they've announced some campaign DLC, then I think it'll be looking potentially very healthy. But the problem that they've got is, are they going to be able to bring players back? That's the hardest thing. Like, is all this going to be enough to bring all these players back, or will they have moved on to the next hot thing?
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think as well, like, I think people can be skeptical of, can the game be turned around in terms of content? And I think that's totally fair. But to me, if Hello Games can turn around No Man's Sky from what it launched to what it is now, which is just unbelievable, in terms of content. And if, Rare can turn Sea of Thieves, which similarly had content issues day one, into what it is now, where it's got tons of stuff to do, and it's got a very dedicated, quite large fan base like No Man's Sky, then there's no reason why 343, given Affinity, given the sheer amount of people involved and the budget for this game, and the collective will, can't within a decent period of time have that kind of same turnaround as those games. Because we're not talking about we're not saying this game needs to have 20 new modes by the end of next year. We're just saying it needs to always have new maps, some new modes, new, more cosmetics, more interesting cosmetics. And obviously single player is a big part of that as well. I think everybody's looking forward to whatever comes next there. But they just need to get that base. I don't feel like they have it yet. And as you say, I think at the end of the year, if they've got co-op, they've got Forge, you've got new maps, you've got community-led modes and maps coming out of Forge, which will help. They always help. Then I think they'll be in a solid place to go for, for a really big 2023, where hopefully you maybe get, towards the end of that, a new single player drop and certain Affinity stuff. And, maybe that comes earlier. I don't know, but that's where I hope the game gets.
Yeah, absolutely. No Man's Sky is a really good example. I mean, you probably saw the update. I think it was just today they announced another massive update for that. And that game, played for a bit, wasn't for me, but you've got to hold your hands up. And, they, especially considering No Man's Sky had a far worse reception than Halo. Yeah. And they've absolutely turned around. I think in the shooter space, the one that I kind of gravitate towards a bit is Rainbow Six Siege, where that game had quite the turnaround and is still one of the most popular sort of shooters around at the moment. And that's been obviously around for some time now. And I think Halo has the potential to have a similar style revival if they obviously get it right. And I appreciate it's still very much an if at the moment. So, yeah, agreed. So we'll see how it goes. Like I say, I'm sure we'll be talking about season 2 next month. Look, it will be good to get your thoughts on that. Well, hopefully we'll have more information on season 3 in the not too distant future. Because if the seasons are going to be condensed to 3 months, they're going to have to start talking about season 3, in the not too distant future, and that'll obviously give us an idea of how they're looking on Forge and stuff. So
absolutely, yeah.
I think maybe the one other point, just to quickly round up this topic, and this is something again we discussed on Discord, Luke, was not to get into sort of the whole acquisition season bollocks that was around, but it did make me think as soon as I read this, how important are certain Affinity to 343 and Xbox, and what does that mean for a potential future acquisition? Not necessarily for any other reason, just to protect an asset. If certain Affinity become such an integral part of the Infinite experience, as long as they're a third party, I guess there's always a risk there that they could get gobbled up by Tencent, or maybe Sony could come along. We know that Sony want to create more live service games. They could see the work that they've done with Halo and think, actually, we want a piece of that. And it did make me think that, right, is this something that's going to be or lead to a potential acquisition in the future? Obviously, we don't necessarily want everyone being gobbled up by one company or two companies, but just purely from a business perspective, I wonder if that's something that Microsoft are looking at, and whether you hear talks about how some agreements are almost trials, like maybe Sony were looking at how Returnal did before they finalized the agreement with Housemarque and things like that. And I wonder if there's something similar here, because I think if they were to lose certain Affinity or to a rival, so to speak, then that's potentially a massive loss, especially if they're becoming so important to Halo and to Xbox in general, with the rumored Monster Hunter game.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it is one of those similar relationships that I guess that Microsoft had with Playground. and that Sony have had with, you know, the likes of Bluepoint and Housemarque and those sorts of studios where, you know, they worked with them closely for a long time. They've kind of mostly dedicated themselves to, you know, Microsoft Xbox products. I could, and I think certain Affinity are pretty big as well. I think they're quite a big studio in terms of you know, sheer numbers. So I suspect that they'll be having a look at it, and obviously some of that will depend on whether certain Affinity actually want to be, you know, under the Xbox umbrella. They may very much relish their independence, but equally, you know, they may get a very good offer that's very hard to refuse, and you know, sometimes that can really sway people. And you know, when there's all those employees, and you know, they don't have to worry anymore. A bit like Double Fine, right? Where they, you know, they could just not have to worry anymore about funding their studio and paying people's wages. You know, they could just focus on making great stuff. So they may get in that position. But I think, you know, it's a really good relationship that they've got with Microsoft. And I think for sure, if anybody else were to come around sniffing, I think, you know, Xbox would pretty quickly be looking to steal a march on people and get something locked down. You know, if they even had the slightest whiff that certain Affinity were looking to sell, I'm sure those discussions would be had very early on, and they'd be kind of pole position to pick them up, you know. You know, much the same as well for other studios that they're working with, you know, Microsoft on those kind of third party, second party exclusive deals, you know, people like Avalanche and those sorts of studios. Agreed.
Lovely. Well, Pox, I think we've had a Halo quarter for the show, mate. We might have done a couple of shows worth of our Halo quarter. To be honest, mate, did you have any thoughts yourself though? Because I appreciate me and Luke talk a lot about it. But you know, we spoke about it last week's show, I think, or maybe a couple of weeks ago. We talked about, you know, what's going to bring it back in. Does the stuff that we talked about, like a PvE or horde type mode or something new to Halo, is that something that you'd be interested in personally?
I would be. I am into those kind of modes. I think, as you was kind of both saying, though, it's like if you're going to do a live service game, then you have to keep providing that content. Otherwise, things do become like they will feel stale after a while, because unfortunately, it's not the early 2000s anymore when we can all happily play the same few maps and modes over and over again and enjoy it. Like I feel like gaming's moved up to such a point where there's now a new expectation on, like, especially on live service stuff as well, that you need to constantly keep pushing out content. And if you don't do that, then like now, right, the game feels like it's dying to the point where, you know, as you say, like this new Fight the Flood mode, whatever it's called, on the Master Chief Collection, has arguably more players via Steam than Infinite does. It seems to be the most important factor of it. And I suppose ultimately for me, that, yeah, I'll have to. It's hard to tell at the moment. I think I'd have to see what it's all about when it comes out, and I'll probably have to wait till then. I think it's a bit hard for me to make a decision now to say whether or not something will or will not tempt me based on certain information. But
hopefully it won't be too long until we know, I guess, mate.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
I do still want to jump into. I still need to finish the Halo Infinite campaign as well. And actually, it kind of brings us to a comment, because I know at the beginning of the show we keep saying we'll read out some comments, and we haven't done any yet. So I've got some here from.
To be fair, there was nothing. I don't think anyone had anything to say on Kingdom Hearts, because I think they were all just sitting there in amusement.
All I saw were a load of WTFs at the beginning for that one, which I completely understand. But I got a Halo-based comment from BMG saying, "I won't be coming back to Halo now until co-op lands. Hopefully this year. Be better to hand the full multiplayer side over to them, in my opinion. But I do think it's time to put Halo to rest and come back to it in maybe 10 years' time with a soft reboot of the series and give it to Arcane Studios."
I'm hoping we're missing the /S at the end of that. I think for the for the final comment, I think you might have been trying to be a little controversial there, BMG. But the first thing's fair, and I think a lot of people are in that boat. Halo Infinite's co-op should come between May and July. You know, they've said it's coming during season 2, so hopefully it's not going to be, you know, too late before we see it. I doubt we're going to see an Arcane style soft reboot of it in 10 years. To be honest, maybe an Arcane Halo spin-off. would be all right. You know, I'm all for them spinning the game off into different directions. But I don't think we'll be getting a soft reboot in 10 years.
Here's another quick question to you, actually, from BMG that I've seen. So BMG earlier in the chat has said, why can't they just import all of the Halo MCC multiplayer stuff into Halo Infinite or combine them in some way? I read that. Like, as Halo fans yourselves, both Scott and Luke, I mean, is this something that you can see happening in the future? Or, should they be separate products at this point? Or, is it an identity thing they're trying to separate?
I think it's probably just more a technical thing. I don't,
I appreciate they can't merge you, but if technical stuff out of the way, if they could do it, do you reckon it's good? Like, would it be worth them doing if it was at all plausible?
Well, I think the issue is, I mean, if you're talking about let's just say maps, right, just as one element. Especially with the older Halos, I don't really think they can mesh with Halo Infinite. They were designed around different mechanics, different movement speed, none of the stuff you have in Infinite. So I feel like that would fundamentally break some of the maps. They just wouldn't be playable. In Halo, I don't know, Halo 2, let's say, in Zanzibar, like, if you're able to bloody run around and parkour up everything somehow, if they got that to work, like, I don't think it'd be the same sort of map that it was. So I think that's, beyond the technical stuff, I think there are game design limitations about what they can actually bring in. And I think pretty much that apply for most things. I mean, I think the well of stuff in MCCs is something they should look at in terms of maps, because there's no reason why they couldn't, design maps around classic maps, but with things built in for Infinite, to make them more modern in that way, or more compatible with the way that Infinite's played, and I think Halo fans would really love that. I mean, if you got, a Blood Gulch, in Infinite, that would be incredible, a redesigned Blood Gulch or something like that. That would be amazing. So, there's plenty of ideas or inspirations in MCC, but I don't think you could bring the stuff over and have it work in the same way. And likewise, there's plenty of modes in MCC you could look at as things that could be brought over or redesigned for Infinite, and I think people would be quite happy about that. But it's just. It's picking and choosing for 343. They have to pick their battles, and invariably, they would get some criticism, I would imagine, if they were to look at, old maps and modes and maybe redesign them somewhat. People would complain, well, it's not really new content, it's not new stuff. It's just going back to the old Halos and picking out the well. So it's quite difficult, but certainly, I mean, I'd quite enjoy them to go back and have a look at MCC and some classic maps and maybe remaster them, remake them for Infinite. I think that would be cool.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, look, I'm not too sure how much backlash they'd get. I think actually the like a classic map pack as part of a season would probably be really well received, especially if it brings back, the Zanzibar is probably my favorite Halo map, ever, to be honest. Blood Gulch is obviously like an instantly recognizable classic that's been in every Halo game, I think, pretty much. It's weird that we don't have a version in this, to be honest. But I think, if anything, the one reason that they probably won't do it where they just sort of merge the games in the way that they have for MCC, you got to remember Halo 5 isn't part of Master Chief Collection either, is because it means they can't go back to that well. If it's in the same package, they've essentially got 5 games worth of content that they can go and rehash at some point, which they absolutely will. I don't think that's a bad thing that they will, because like I say, there's a lot to work on there. But they can go back and they can go, right, well, look, now we're bringing Zanzibar and Midship, Sidewinder. They're bringing all these classic maps.
Don't bring Midship back. Don't bring Midship.
Yeah, they bring about Midship. Look, in some capacity, I agree. I don't like it, but it's coming. But they've always got that to almost rely on. If they're ever struggling for inspiration for a map,
it's right there.
They've got 5 games worth of content to go back to. So I think Infinite will continue to be its own platform. Master Chief Collection will be its own thing, and Halo 5 just seemingly forgotten in the ether or something, where it's almost like 5 doesn't exist, which I find funny.
Yeah, but yeah, bring back Zanzibar. That's a all-time classic map.
Yeah, 100%. So, do we have any other comments, Pucks, out of interest?
No, I can see. I'm aware of time as well. So unless you guys wanted to add anything else, I'm happy to move on to our final main topic, which we had, which I don't think it's going to take too much time. Because I know on our thumbnail that Flat put together, he mentioned about how there are apparently some further rumors about some new potential Xbox hardware coming along. The latest I'd read personally was that Xbox are working on basically a second revision of their current chip for Series S and X chip to make it much more power efficient. So not much necessarily different in terms of functionality, but just differences and optimizations internally to make it use less power is all I've really heard. So have you guys heard anything more regarding any potential new hardware rumors outside of what I've just said, or have I missed something, or is that basically about what you've heard as well?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. It's as you say, it's it's a revision of the existing APU essentially. It'll be more power efficient, probably lead to lower production cost. It's something that all consoles do at some point. This is a little bit earlier than usual, I would say, but it's not surprising. And eventually, they will start to get the node size down so that they can have even greater, efficiencies. I mean, they may even try with this one. I don't know. But also then it leads to potentially being able to shrink your console as well, to have revisions of the design of the console, which is obviously a thing that is also handy and that people enjoy going forward. So
that's the reason the Series X is so massive, isn't it? It's all mainly cooling, isn't it? So.
Yeah, there's a lot of very clever cooling, and I mean, PS5 exactly the same. It's they're big. I mean, the PS5 is definitely bigger than the Series X, and most of that size is because of heatsink. Especially on the PS5, it's because the heatsink is massive. And they need a lot of surface area to cool the chip. Yeah. So Series X is different, probably a little bit more elegant in a way. They have the split motherboard, and then kind of the cycle that comes in from the bottom goes up. But it's still, if you pick up a Series X, it's bloody heavy. It's deceptively heavy. And that is again because it has a whopping great big heatsink in it. So. If you manage to shrink your node, then they should be able to have a smaller heatsink, and that will result in smaller consoles. So I think this is the first step for that. It won't give any performance boost at all, but it will be good for the future, and obviously more power efficient is always a good thing. I think it's cool news. Not unexpected, but it's cool news. I expect, I'm sure Sony are doing the same, and obviously, I think everybody's hoping that their revisions will result in a smaller console. Going down the line. Because if there's one complaint, I guess, about the PlayStation 5 as a piece of hardware, it's that it's a very big boy. So
It's funny you say that, because if I wanted to have if I bought a PS5 and I wanted to have it on the TV downstairs, I literally have nowhere to put it. It won't fit in the gaps that are in my sort of entertainment center, whatever it's called. To be fair, I wouldn't even want my Xbox now. I've actually got my Xbox just behind the TV for it to stand, but there's not enough horizontal space for a PS5 in there, so I literally wouldn't be able to fit it on there. So I would love for them to be able to do that. But yeah, I think right, this is just kind of a natural evolution that all consoles go through. I was a little bit surprised that the news took off in the way that it did, because it was almost like people were making a bigger deal about it than maybe they needed to. And whether this leads to a revised hardware or not is, I guess, almost irrelevant in a way. You know, the chips will be, or these new revised chips will be in whatever shape or form the Series X and S happen to come in going forward. Obviously, if it allows them to shrink it down, I'd be really curious as to what a shrunk Series X looks like. Do you think they would go for a Series X that's just the same shape but smaller, or do you think if they could get it, they would maybe go for a more traditional, what we kind of know of a, you know, maybe more Series S type design for a Series X? Or do you think they like the distinct look of the Series X?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? Because I think when everybody saw it for the first time, myself included, I was kind of like, oh, that's really weird. It's not a traditional console design at all. I mean, it's more equivalent to, you know, a PC in a lot of ways. You know, kind of a vertical unit. Obviously, a lot smaller, but so I think. So I don't know if they actually, you know, now would change it, because I think it's very distinctive, you know, and it's when you get a Series X in hand, it's actually quite an attractive looking piece of hardware. You know, it's
in a weird way.
When vertical. I think horizontal. It's weird when you put it horizontal. It changes, which is, you know, it's weird. I think it's mainly because of the bottom. I think the bottom of the console is so designed for it to be vertical that it looks.
Do you guys have your systems vertical then?
Yeah.
I think it's obviously. I think it's obviously designed as a vertical console. That's obviously evident by looking at it, but just the way that they've got the heat coming from the bottom coming out the top, it's obviously designed to be vertical. So just in the interest of getting a console in its early in its life cycle, I want to make sure it's, you know, working as optimally as it possibly can. So I was always going to have mine vertical, but then even just aesthetically, I think it just looks significantly better.
Yeah, it's a nice piece of hardware. You know, it's not actually that big. I mean, anybody who has a Series X knows it's not really that big. It's certainly a lot bigger than the Series S, but that is only because the Series S is incredibly small, you know, by comparison. Just a really tiny unit. So I don't really know if they would change it, because I think people have kind of really liked the design. I don't think it's a case of PlayStation 5 where, you know, and I like the design of the PlayStation 5, funnily enough, but I think it's very Marmite. That console, like, and especially when you have it in hand, some people really do dig how it looks, and some people really don't. I don't think the Series X is like that. I think it's pretty much universally liked in terms of its design, but certainly I think Microsoft would potentially look at changing it, if only because, you know, the practicalities of owning a Series X are a little bit more difficult than owning a Series S, where, you know, that can fit into any entertainment unit in any configuration. Really, the Series X just can't. Like like you, Scott, I have my Series X behind my TV, I have my PlayStation 5 behind my TV, because well first of all, my unit doesn't have slots, you know, that you typically put these kind of boxes in, but also because that's really, you can't put them in front of the TV, you know, like even with a stand, like it just doesn't work. They're too big. So I think they'd look at changing it if they could get it closer to the Series S. I think that's something they would look at. But personally, I really like the Series X design, so I hope they stick with it.
That begs the question. Sorry, go on, Pucks. Apologies.
No, I was just going to say, I ultimately agree with that. I don't think they would, even if they did make a more power efficient chips, etc. I don't think they would. I personally don't. I think there's more, not in a serious way, but I think there's arguably a bit more harm that could come from making a different design or a slightly altered design, and that's mainly just around consumer confusion. I would imagine to have different versions of the same thing. I know. Arguably, also you could say that almost do like the Nintendo approach, where you just discontinue an older revision and then make the new one the standard. But I would still potentially argue that people may then get confused to say, well, what's the difference? Why would I want that one versus this one? Whereas keeping it the same just keeps it universal, right? Unless you're going to have a whole new, like, you know, mid-gen release, and then that becomes your new standard, then Outside of that, outside of a mid-gen update, I don't think you'd ever see. I don't see much point, in having a different look.
Yeah, I guess it's just more the practicalities. Is if they shrink the insides down, because they can, obviously, if you don't need as much cooling, you don't need as much copper, you don't need as big a heatsink, you don't need as much space to put it in. Like, it might become impractical if you shrink the insides enough because of the increased efficiency of the chip to have a big case, if that makes sense. So it might be, I don't know if I'm even speaking sense, to be perfectly honest, but just thinking about it, it might become almost inevitable that they've kind of got to shrink the overall box down, because they're not going to necessarily.
I'd argue in a way it's maybe not quite as easy as that, though, because it's one thing to have the physical chip be smaller, but then you still got every other supporting component around it which are of fixed size. Whether it's all service mount resistors, capacitors, or whatever. Like, they only come in fixed sizes, and no doubt they're going to be going as small as they can at the moment anyway.
Yeah. That's fair. But I mean, say, for example, if they decide to go for a diskless Series X as part of, when they get the opportunity to decrease the cooler, and they have a smaller heatsink, they maybe got a smaller fan, they don't have a disk drive. They probably, if they go for that model, they probably can't stick. Well, I mean, they obviously could, but I guess it would be almost weird for them to stick with the same design,
that kind of model,
with fewer and smaller components.
Do you remember the early concepts when the Series X was literally a cube, almost like a GameCube type thing? I mean,
honestly, I would love that. I would, if they could get the Series X to be almost GameCube like, but the same size, just much shorter. That I think that would be
I would love that. Yeah,
I would really love to see if they do, because look, and you mentioned there, if they could get the Series X to be a similar size to the Series S, that would be cool. But then, how small are they going to get the Series S?
Yeah,
like it's going to be like a old school Wii. Like back in the day, if they reduce it.
I'd be interested to see what the S would look like. I mean, surely you would have to make it smaller just to keep differentiating between the products a bit better, because it's very clear right now which one's X and S. Yeah. And it would make sense to, because you can bring your production cost down on the S as well, which is only beneficial from that perspective. So, yeah, maybe it'll just be like I don't know, like Tamagotchi size or something like that. You just, with one HDMI port.
We're finally getting to the future where VMUs are back in everyone's minds, and that's the dream, isn't it? That's the dream, when everyone's got Skies of Arcadia on the VMU, and it's just a Series S, and Xbox finally have their handheld, I guess. So, yeah, it's interesting. It's like, well, I guess as interesting as this sort of news can be, and it's obviously fun to speculate, but it's probably important to stress that this is just sort of a natural thing in the cycle of a console generation, and we're probably not going to see at E3. This isn't like the Series X Pro or the Series X or anything like that. This is just natural, I guess, is probably the way to say it. Oh,
yeah, no, definitely. Sorry, I was just reading some of the comments. That's cool. I'm just 20 past 9. I know we had a few things in the back pocket. Do you guys potentially want to quickly discuss any of those, or are you happy to start wrapping up now, do you reckon?
Yeah, I guess maybe one thing that I would like Luke's opinion on. Actually, we had this from BMG earlier in the chat, and we've spoken about this a lot, so I guess we don't have to spend too much time on it. But BMG raised the question earlier today, which was the SoC investment group apparently has urged Activision shareholders to vote against Microsoft acquiring. I think the acquisition vote is due very soon, maybe even as soon as next week. The SoC investment group does obviously have a shareholding in Activision Blizzard, and they've essentially said they don't think it shows the true value of Activision Blizzard, and urged the shareholders to vote against it. Now, I have seen since that, and just to add to it, that they're not exactly a significant shareholder in Activision Blizzard. I think they turned out to have like 0.8% of the shareholding.
Oh, wow, okay.
So, they're not exactly a big player there. But look, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. Is this typical? Is it to be expected? Is this just maybe SSC Investment Group maybe seeing a bigger potential buyout in the future, or what are your thoughts on that, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, it's it's not uncommon that this sort of stuff would happen in large public mergers. I've seen it before. You typically get it from pretty activist shareholders, because most shareholders don't really care, in the sense of, they are pretty happy with these kinds of offers, right? And I do understand the rationale from SOC, because I think their rationale was essentially, as you said, Scott, we think it's undervalued. And the reason we think it's undervalued is essentially because the practices of Activision Blizzard and all the various lawsuits that have been going on, and, discrimination lawsuits, sexual harassment lawsuits, blah, 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 have, deflated the share price such that it's not reflective at present of what the company is probably worth in comparison to, revenue and the future products it's going to put out and all that. So I don't think it's them just, piping up for no reason. I think they probably genuinely believe that. But also, they are an entity that in the past is, I think they called for Bobby Kotick's resignation. They called for the chairman of the board's resignation. They are activists. So it's not surprising that they've done something like this. And ultimately, it makes absolutely no difference at all, because, even if they vote against it, as you say, Scott, they have a very, very small portion of the shares in the company. They will hold the same sorts of shares as everybody else, which will have all equal voting rights, so they'll be swiftly outnumbered. I mean, it's not going to make any difference to whether the shareholders vote to approve the merger agreement, and I would be pretty shocked if en masse the shareholders didn't vote to approve it. I mean, it's almost never happens when you get a solid offer like this, because most just want to liquidate their investment and get out of there, and they're very happy. I mean, interesting stuff, and obviously SOC have written to the other shareholders, they want them to reject it. I don't think that will be taken up en masse at all. But yeah, it does happen. It does happen sometimes, that shareholders do kind of make these kind of statements, and they want things to go a particular way, but they get outnumbered, which I think will happen here.
I think if you read the statement from them, which I read just before the show, as you said there, Luke, obviously they've called for Bobby Kotick's resignation in the past, and effectively what they want is an Activision Blizzard under a new board of directors to take them out of the mess that they've got themselves into. So it's almost admirable in a way what they're trying to achieve. A question I maybe have for you, and you might not be able to answer this with it being sort of in the States, but I assume there's like a percentage where, say 75%, if 75% vote in favor, then the other 25% have just got to kind of accept it. They don't have a say in the matter, I assume. Do you know what that percentage is, or roughly what it would typically be for these types of deals?
Yeah, so I don't I don't know in this case what the percentage is, but you're absolutely right. There's always a threshold. So it's not that the vote requires the affirmation of all shareholders. They never do. This is akin to something like a scheme of arrangement, which is a legal concept that I won't go into. It's a way of binding shareholders and creditors in some cases, and
or a level on Kingdom Hearts, maybe,
or a level on and led by Organization 13, so with that sort of thing, for example, the typical threshold is 3/4, so it's exactly the percentage you said. It's 75%, and what happens is when that proportion of shareholders en masse that hold voting rights, that's another important thing. It's only shareholders that have actual voting rights. when they approve it, they effectively, and technically this is not the legal term, and ignore me if anybody's a lawyer listening, but they do something called they drag the other shareholders. And all that means is they bind the other shareholders legally to follow the arrangement. So it's exactly the same here. I don't know what that percentage is. I suspect it's probably 75% because that's a usual one. So so that will happen here. I'm pretty confident of that. They will probably get a very high percentage of shareholders approving this, more than I would suspect more than 75% quite easily. And then it becomes binding as a matter of law, and then you provided it doesn't collapse for any other reasons, for example via the FTC or the EU competition authority, then it will press on.
On the subject of the FTC, I guess just to maybe wrap it up, we've just got another question there from BMG who asks, do the FTC have to wait until this vote happens before they start with what their investigations? I would assume not, because I imagine they've probably already started.
Yeah, no. So the regulatory consent exists independent of the shareholders voting to approve something. So you would always be pressing on because the idea is that as best as possible you want all this to coalesce at the same time, because you don't want, for example, it's very frustrating in these sorts of things where you might have, let's say, a scheme of arrangement's been approved, you've had a court that sanctioned it, you're all ready to go, and the last condition, precedent as they're called, on your merger agreement is that you're waiting for the consent of competition authorities across the world, because how long's a piece of string with that, right? Some can do it very quickly. I've had experiences with the EU Commission and the UK one and in Jersey, and sometimes it's really slow. So it just depends. You start basically the moment I've dealt with this before, but the moment you sign your merger agreement or your share purchase agreement or anything like this, within 2 weeks you're already spinning up your application for consent to a regulatory authority and saying, right, here's everything we hope that you need. Can you consent to this, or give us a no objection, or let us know if you need more details. So they'll have started that process ages ago, and the FTC will have been reviewing for some time on that. And it's a little bit different in the US, just for FYI, which is that the FTC itself can't block a merger from happening. All they can do is apply to court to do that.
That's what happened with NVIDIA and ARM, wasn't it? They didn't block it. They essentially sued NVIDIA for the acquisition, which ultimately ended up falling through.
Yes, exactly. So they don't have the authority under US federal law to actually stop that. That's, by comparison, the EU competition authority do. So they can just say nope, and that's it. You just can't have your merger then. It collapses. So, or they can impose various conditions to giving consent, like you have to hive off, certain businesses or products or whatever. So, none of that's going to happen here. It's all. I'm very confident that it will go through. Not because I'm really, into it going through. Like, I'm mostly ambivalent at this point, but it's more just an analysis perspective. I cannot see why it wouldn't, and it would be a very interesting legal argument if the FTC said it shouldn't. I think maybe just for people's information, I just looked it up there. The vote is happening April 28th, so 2 weeks today, with the result apparently being shared on May 4th, so another week after that. So we'll obviously hear a little bit more about how the SLC investment groups please went with the other shareholders. But it does say that apparently the vote's being described as non-binding and advisory. So, I guess it might not mean an awful lot in the grand scheme of things anyway, if it's non-binding and advisory. But I saw this, but I don't know if it was the language is a little confusing, because I think they say the advisory non-binding bit in respect of something else that they're voting on, distinct from the merger agreement.
GameIndustry.biz article on it, and that's
I think that's the article that I read actually that described it weirdly, and I don't think that's actually how the actual notice that Activision have put out to their shareholders reads. I'll try and dig it up in the background, but I'll have a look.
Yeah, no, that'll be interesting, and they did say, the board directors unanimously agrees to the sale essentially, and they've advised that it's in the interest of Activision Blizzard and its stockholders to vote for it. So yeah, we'll obviously find out in the next two or 3 weeks if there is any shocks or surprises there, I guess.
No, definitely. Thank you very much for your insights, Luke. I know, as people have been saying in the comments, BMG, you definitely know your shit. So it's great to get your insights. Thanks for that.
Well, yes, it is my job. So I guess you have to know your shit. Yeah, I would not be very good if I didn't know it. But yeah, no, that's very kind.
No, that's good. No, thanks very much for that. And unless there's anything else, I think I'm happy to wrap up the show there, guys. So no, thank you all very much for listening. It's obviously Easter weekend this weekend, so hopefully you all will enjoy your 4-day weekend off, assuming you do have time off. And for the same reasons, there won't be a coffee morning show this Thursday, but we will be back hopefully next week Thursday to bring you some more gaming goodness and good chat. So apart from that, unless there's anything else you guys want to mention, I think that's us for the weekend.
No, just obviously hope everyone has a lovely long Easter weekend with a bit of luck. Yeah,
definitely. Are you ready on the outro button, Scott? If you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, we've got everything. So this is the thing when Flap's not here. It's like it's a team effort to get the technicalities right, isn't it? To make sure.
Yeah, and trying to remember how to sign off properly. It feels like I've not done it forever. Cool, nice one. Anyway, no, take care, everybody. Have a good Easter break, and we should all see you next week. Take care, all.